In our reading from Exodus today, we see that Moses and Aaron have gone to Pharaoh and have tried to talk about the problems of their own people. They've done what God has told them to do. And what's happened? Things have gone from bad to worse. Pharaoh has responded by making impossible demands upon his slaves, the Jews, who are now complaining. Moses goes back to God. He says, "What have you done to me? I've done what you've told me to do, and things are only getting worse." Now, that's kind of like life sometimes. But God says, "I'm not finished yet." Also notice that God, in Exodus in particular, responds when people complain. Now, the Jews make a habit and perhaps a livelihood almost of complaining, and yet it is their outcry that stirs up God to begin with. And it is Moses going back to God and saying, "What's up here?" that gets God to respond to him again. Being holy doesn't just mean sitting there and smiling that stupid smile. If you're upset, go to God. Tell him you're upset. What do you think prayer is, if not a dialogue or a dialectic between you and God? Anyway, more about Exodus later. I want to take a look at the second chapter of Wisdom. Now, the book of Wisdom is what the Protestants call, it's a part of the Apocrypha. It's one of the books written not in Hebrew, but in Greek in the Old Testament. And the Protestants cut these books out of the Old Testament. So if you've got a Protestant Bible, you won't find this book. You've got to either find it online or get a Catholic Bible. I'm going to show you the New Jerusalem translation, which is quite good, and I'm going to refer to one of the footnotes from the New Jerusalem Bible. Footnotes in the New Jerusalem are excellent. Now, my first semester students, we began reading the wisdom books from the Old Testament with Ecclesiastes because I thought that was closest to the mindset and the worldview of today. And you find, in the same way that Psalm 78 was sort of a synopsis of salvation history for the Jews, so this is kind of a synopsis of Ecclesiastes. Or you might say, of our modern mindset, even of Nietzsche. And this is the false argument they use, they being the fools, the unbelievers, the materialists, who were quite active even back in the day, not just in our day. The unbelievers, the materialists say, our life is short and dreary. There is no remedy when our end comes. No one is known to have come back from Hades. Resurrection? Bah! This life here is all we got, folks. And you know, it's already shot, folks. We came into being by chance. There is no order or design to life. It's mere randomness. And afterwards shall be as though we had never been. The breath in our nostrils is a puff of smoke. Reason, a spark from the beating of our hearts. Extinguish this, the beating of our hearts, and the body turns to ashes, and the spirit melts away like the yielding air. Reason is a mere epiphenomenon of material processes. This is what most people believe today, much less whenever this book was written, which was probably, I think, I haven't looked lately, but I think this is probably the 3rd century BC or thereabout. So this is, 2,300 years ago, thereabouts. There's nothing new under the sun. The preacher got that right in Ecclesiastes, because this is the philosophy of unbelievers in those days and in our day. They continue. In time, our name will be forgotten. Nobody will remember what we have done. Our life will pass away like wisps of cloud, dissolving like the mist that the sun's rays drive away and that its heat dispels. For our days are the passing of a shadow. Our end is without return. The seal is affixed and nobody comes back. You have to give the author of the Book of Wisdom credit. He is presenting the philosophy of his opponents, and he is doing it in a beautifully poetic way. There's a kind of beauty to this evaporation of existence, untrue though it is. So what do we do if this life here is all we got, folks, and it is already shot, folks? if this is it, if everything that we value, love, that's just your hormones, there's no such thing as love. Meaning and reason, things you put your hope in, well, that's just your biology. That's evolution speaking. That's evolution trying to convince you that you need to do something important because it's valuable to the species. But what's the species? What's life? It's just a random conglomeration of matter. And when life ends, well, it's kind of like when something evaporates and it's here today, gone tomorrow. So how should we live? Well, I'll tell you how I would live if this were true. I would be, in Chesterton's phrase, a happy pagan, a bold pagan. Come then, let us enjoy the good things of today. Let us use created things with the zest of youth. Take our fill of the dearest wines and perfumes, wine, women, and song. On no account forego the flowers of spring, but crown ourselves with rosebuds before they wither. Gather your rosebuds while ye may. No meadow exclude from our orgy, the orgy of gathering flowers, but of course we could find orgies that were probably more interesting. Let us leave the signs of our revelry elsewhere, since this is our portion, this our lot. Life is meaningless. Just enjoy it while you got the chance. But then what do you do about right and wrong? Right and wrong? Ha! There is no right or wrong. As for the upright man who is poor, let us oppress him. Somebody's trying to live with integrity. Integrity? There is no integrity. Because of that, they're poor, because they are not lusting after money. They're not filled with greed like the rest of us. What are we going to do with him? Let's oppress him. Let us not spare the widow, nor respect old age, white-haired with many years. Let our might be the yardstick of right, since weakness argues its own futility. Might makes right. Might is the yardstick of right. How do you measure what is right or wrong? Merely by might. If you're powerful, if you're the president, if you're the king, if you're the millionaire that we all admire, whatever you do, we will imitate because we love power. Might makes right. We want to be like you because you're on top of the hill. And by the way, if we get a chance, we'll knock you off so that we can be on top of the hill. I mean, this is how the world lives. Let us lay traps for the upright man, since he annoys us and oppresses our way of life, reproaches us for our sins against the law, and accuses us of sins against our upbringing. In other words, all of the prophets, including John the Baptist and Jesus, they all stand as signs of contradiction to how we live. They are pointing out that we are not righteous. What are we going to do? Well, they annoy us. Let's get rid of them. He, the righteous man, claims to have knowledge of God and calls himself a child of the Lord. We see him as a reproof to our way of thinking. The very sight of him weighs our spirits down. For this kind of life is not like other people's, his kind of life, and his ways are quite different. As long as there is one man who lives for righteousness, the unrighteous cannot sleep peacefully because their conscience is troubled. In his opinion, we are counterfeit. He avoids our ways as he would filth. He proclaims the final end of the upright as blessed and boasts of having God for his father. Who does this remind you of? This is written hundreds of years before Christ, at least 200 years. Who goes around being righteous and talking about how bad the unrighteous are and calls God his father? Now there's a footnote. We're almost done. I know I'm going on for quite some time. Here's one of the great footnotes. I've got to, these footnotes are not online, so I got to look at my New Jerusalem Bible. In the Bible, the expression the child of God or the son of God often means Israel or the Israelites. The Israelites are his chosen people, his children, his sons. But there is a gradual tendency to reserve it, the title son of God, for the upright, for the righteous individual, or to the nation of the future, Israel perfected. They give then many examples in the Old Testament. It is occasionally applied to individuals. Although on occasion an Israelite may invoke God as Father, no Israelite ever calls himself his child, his son. Throughout the rest of the book, the title is applied to the Israelites of the past as members of a holy people throughout the rest of this book, the Book of Wisdom. In other words, when Jesus talks about praying to our Father, and Father is Abba, and calls himself the Son of God, the Son of Man, you didn't do that as a devout Jew. Even here in the Book of Wisdom, it's the unrighteous who are complaining of this, as the Pharisees did. All right, let's wrap this up. Let us see if what he says is true and test him to see what sort of end he will have. Let's put him to the test, this righteous fake, this phony. For if the upright man is God's son, God will help him and rescue him from the clutches of his enemies. Remember when Jesus is hanging on the cross. If you are the Son of God, if you know, let yourself down. You're the Messiah, God's your Father. Come off the cross. And of course, the devil torments him in the wilderness. If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. This is prophesying both what the devil says in the Gospels and what the scribes and Pharisees say in taunting Jesus. Let's nail you to a cross and test you. You think you're so special? Let's see, because we don't like you. You annoy us. You don't live the way we do. Peer pressure at the very least. Let us test him with cruelty and with torture, and thus explore this gentleness of his and put his patience to the test. This is prophecy. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, since God will rescue him, or so he claims. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross, big shot. This is the way they reason. This was all in quotes. This is what the unrighteous say. This is the way they reason, but they are misled, since their malice makes them blind. They do not know the hidden things of God, nor they do not hope for the reward of holiness. They do not believe in a reward for blameless souls. They do not think of death and what comes after as something that really is the test of their mettle. For God created human beings to be immortal. He made them as an image of his own nature. Death came into the world only through the devil's envy, as those who belong to him find to their cost. The beyond, what is after this life, if we don't think on that, we become like these fools, like these unrighteous. Now, that's powerful stuff. And the Protestants ripped it out of the Old Testament, which is a shame. Some Protestant Bibles will include these books in between the Old and the New Testament. But as you can see, clearly the Book of Wisdom is inspired. Well, I went on for a long time. I almost took us all the way to the threshold of death, at least mine, because I don't have that long to go. You know that.